I was a forensic pathologist for nearly 35 years. These days, I live alone in a quiet, aging house on the edge of a Michigan suburb. The winters bite harder here. The shadows stick around longer than they should. And silence, well, it's no stranger to me. After retirement, I scraped by on a small pension. But most of my income came from a tiny guest house behind my main home. Nothing special, just a single-bedroom unit with poor insulation and creaky pipes. Still, it's quiet, private, and most importantly, always rented. Until 3 weeks ago. The last tenant vanished overnight. No goodbye. No text. Just left a key hanging from a rusted nail on the porch. Since then, it's sat empty. I told myself I'd fix the plumbing, repaint, maybe finally upgrade the damn broken window latch. But every time I picked up a tool, something held me back. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the echo of scalpels, of sterile tables, of cold skin under rubber gloves. Maybe I just missed the dead. Last Thursday night, I woke up at 2:03 a.m. Freezing. The house was still. Too still. And the old landline, one I hadn't used in years, was ringing. Only a handful of people even had that number anymore. Mostly property managers. Maybe a few hospitals. But no one who should be calling me then. I hesitated. Then picked up. Hello? No answer. Just static. Like an old radio drifting between stations. I was about to hang up when a voice finally came through. Male. Young. Slow. Every word like gravel sliding from a dry throat. I heard, "You have a place for rent." I gripped the receiver tighter. "You're calling at 2 in the morning to rent a house? I need something quiet. Isolated. No neighbors. Do you have a name?" Silence. Then. "You can call me Grady." The name hit me like ice water. I'd written that name before. Grady L. Morin. Autopsy file. Time of death, over a decade ago. I gave him the address. I don't know why. It felt like I wasn't in control of my voice. Like someone had already spoken for me. After I hung up, I stood in the dark living room. Outside, snow blanketed the lawn. Untouched. But then I saw them. Footprints. Leading from the street. To the guest house. Fresh. Deep. But no one had arrived. No one could have. Not unless they'd already been here before they ever called. I didn't sleep after that call. I couldn't. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring out the back window toward the guest house. The snow had covered the footprints again, but I knew what I'd seen. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the porch light to the guest house turned on. I hadn't given him a key. Hell, I hadn't even confirmed the rental. I grabbed a flashlight, stepped into my boots, and made my way across the frozen lawn. No prints this time. No sound except for the dull hum of that porch light. When I reached the door, I knocked once hard. Grady? No answer. I twisted the knob. Unlocked. Inside was empty. Still dusty. Still cold. But someone had been here. There was a smell, faint but distinct. Formaldehyde. I backed out and locked the door behind me. Tried to convince myself I was imagining things. I was getting older. Tired. Maybe the years had finally caught up. But when I stepped back into my main house, a manila folder was sitting in the middle of the hallway floor. It hadn't been there before. It was from my time at the medical examiner's office. I recognized the seal. One of the old autopsy files I kept for training purposes. The front of the folder was labeled in faded ink. Morin, Grady L. Male, 29. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to skull. Notified, next of kin, none. I opened it slowly. And as I flipped through the report, one detail made my blood run cold. Body released for burial, never claimed. Final storage date, December 19, 2009. Facility, Wayne County Morgue. My breath caught. That body was never buried. Never cremated. No one ever came for it. And now, 14 years later, someone using his name had just moved into my backyard. I spent the rest of the morning trying to call the morgue. No answer. I tried to reach my former supervisor. Disconnected line. Every time I thought I was being paranoid, I glanced at the folder again. At the final note scribbled in red pen. Body stored too long. Marked for discard. Tag removed. No record of disposal. No photo on file. At dawn, I walked back out to the guest house. The porch light was still on. But the front door? This time, it was wide open. And sitting on the doorstep was a small white envelope with my name written on it. Dr. Ellis. I picked it up, opened it, and pulled out a single note. I never forgot you. I stepped through the open door of the guest house just after sunrise. The place was dimly lit by the yellow overhead bulb buzzing slightly, like it hadn't been used in years. It smelled worse now. Not just of formaldehyde, but of something older. Like wet cloth and rotted wood. Like something that had once been preserved, and then forgotten. The living room had been rearranged. Furniture pushed aside. And right in the middle, where the coffee table had been the day before, stood a metal table. Old. Stained. My knees buckled. It was the exact model of autopsy table I'd used during my early years at the Wayne County Morgue. Stainless steel. Train hole at the bottom. Adjustable tray. Except this one had a crack across the corner, just like the one I broke in 1994 after a slip during a late-night procedure. I approached it slowly, flashlight in hand. There was something lying on it. Not a body. A set of tools arranged in perfect order. Scalpel. Forceps. Bone saw. Sutures. Toe tag. All clean. All new. But the labels? My handwriting. I hadn't touched these in years. Some of the items had been banned decades ago. I stepped back and scanned the room again. Someone had recreated a working morgue in the middle of my guest house. And then I noticed something else. Photos. Pinned to the wall above the table. Autopsy photos. All ones I'd taken. But none of these had ever been released. Some were from cases that had been sealed. In the center was a grainy, overexposed photo of a man's face. Eyes closed. Bruised jaw. Missing teeth. I didn't recognize him at first. Then I saw the toe tag in the photo. And the name scrawled on it in my own handwriting. Morin, Grady L. A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But when I turned back, the photo of Grady was gone from the wall. I backed out of the room and slammed the door behind me. Back in the house, I grabbed the old folder again. I flipped to the autopsy sketch. The man in that file, Grady, had suffered a massive head wound. But there was a note scribbled at the bottom I had missed before. Subject had facial trauma inconsistent with story provided by intake. Possible misidentification. File never closed. That night, I set up motion sensors outside the guest house. If anyone or anything went in or out, I'd know. I barely slept. And at 3:03 a.m., the alarm on my phone went off. Motion detected. I opened the security app. Checked the camera feed. There was someone standing at the autopsy table. Back turned. Shoulders hunched. He was doing something, slow, methodical. Then he turned just enough to reveal the edge of his face. There was no lower jaw. Only skin and broken teeth. Just like the photo that vanished. And then he looked straight at the camera, straight at me. I watched the camera feed for another minute. The figure never moved again. He just stood there, half turned toward the lens, face mangled, broken, and incomplete. Then, with no warning, the feed cut to static. I rushed to the back door, flashlight in one hand, kitchen knife in the other. My breath caught in the cold. The snow was falling harder now. But when I reached the guest house, the lights were off. No footprints. No sound. Inside, the autopsy table was still there. The tools had been moved. Now arranged in a different order. The order of a Y incision. I stepped closer. On the table lay a single object wrapped in gauze. Trembling, I unwrapped it. A human jawbone. Still slick. Still warm. What the hell was I looking at? I was retired. Out of this life. The last autopsy I performed was in 2011. But this was recent. I dropped the bone and backed away, heart pounding in my throat. That's when I saw the new item tacked to the wall. Another photograph. But this time it wasn't from the morgue. It was from my house, the hallway, taken just hours ago. And in it, you could clearly see me, standing in the kitchen, holding the envelope from Grady. But the photograph was taken from inside the house. Someone had been in here. Watching me. I locked every door. Every window. Pulled the blinds. Turned off the lights. But the moment I sat down, the landline rang again. 2:09 a.m. I picked it up with a shaking hand. Alice. The voice rasped, no longer trying to sound human. Do you remember what you did, To me, my throat closed up. Grady? Silence. You were never supposed to be in that drawer. Never meant to be discarded. I was awake. You cut me open while I was still alive. I dropped the receiver. No. That wasn't possible. It couldn't be. We had protocols. Multiple confirmations. Vital signs. I would never. But the memory. There was a case. A man brought in from an abandoned property. No ID. Multiple traumas. Pronounced dead at the scene. But I remembered something strange, a muscle spasm during the first incision. Told myself it was post-mortem reflex. It happens. Rare, but it happens. Still, I didn't report it. Didn't tell the staff. I just finished the job. And now he was back. I went to the basement. Opened the storage cabinet. Inside, packed in a sealed box, was a toe tag I had kept for reasons I never fully understood. I flipped it over. Name, Grady L. Morin. Date, December 19th, 2009. Time, 2:03 a.m. That was the exact minute the first phone call came in. I dropped the tag and stumbled backward. From the shadows of the basement, I heard a sound. Metal dragging across concrete. And a whisper. You left me open. I bolted up the basement stairs and slammed the door shut behind me. I locked it. Deadbolt, chain, everything. But that whisper. You left me open. Echoed in my ears like it had been carved into my skull. I hadn't heard that voice in over a decade, and I shouldn't be hearing it now. I returned to the kitchen, hands shaking, trying to find something to ground myself. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from under the sink and took a long pull. Then I remembered something, a detail from that original autopsy. I rushed back to the folder on the dining table and flipped to the second page. There it was. Signs of reflexive muscle contraction during initial incision. Dismissed as post-mortem artifact. There was also a note in red pen, written by me. I recognized my handwriting. No additional signs of life observed. I remembered writing that. But I also remembered hesitating before I did. Because something about Grady's body had unsettled me. The warmth of the skin. The faint moisture in his eyes. The way his fingers curled slightly as I touched the chest. Back then, I convinced myself it was my imagination. I had to. Otherwise, I had killed a man who was still alive. Now, it was like the guilt had grown a body of its own. At exactly 3:33 a.m., every light in my house flickered off. Power outage. And then, the TV, which wasn't even plugged in, sparked to life. White static. And a voice through the screen. Come finish what you started. I stepped back. Do it right this time. Cut deeper. Make sure I don't wake up again. I turned and ran. I didn't grab a coat. Didn't lock the door. I sprinted to my car, keys in hand. But when I threw the door open, he was sitting in the driver's seat. Or what was left of him. Skin gray, stretched over bone. His jaw, the one I'd found earlier, was now sewn back on, crudely. The stitches ran across his face like barbed wire. He turned his head toward me. No eyes. Just dark, wet sockets leaking something black down his cheeks. You should have checked again, doctor. I fell backward onto the driveway, gasping. And from the guest house behind me, the lights flicked on again. This time, glowing surgical light. The autopsy table was clearly visible through the window. And now, there was someone on it. Strapped down. Covered in a sheet. A familiar figure. The body was me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then the front door to the guest house slowly creaked open, inviting me in. The cold was unbearable now. My hands shook as I stood in the snow, staring at the guest house. Its windows glowed with that same sterile, surgical light I'd spent decades under. But this wasn't a hospital. This wasn't the morgue. It was something else now. A shrine. Built to everything I tried to forget. Inside, the table waited. So did the tools. And on the table lay a body under a white sheet, motionless, silent. My body. I couldn't comprehend it. Was I dreaming? Dead? Or had I finally gone mad? The wind whispered through the trees. Or maybe it wasn't the wind. Do it right this time. The voice was everywhere now. Inside my ears. My chest. My bones. I stepped forward. Each footfall felt like sinking into wet clay. My body moved on its own like it remembered this walk. This ritual. I entered the guest house. It was warm. Unnaturally warm. The air smelled of bleach, blood, and burnt skin. The table sat in the center, gleaming. The instruments were already laid out. Scalpel. Bone saw. Sutures. Toe tag already filled out. Name, Dr. Alice C. Vaughn. Time of death, pending. I stared at the covered figure on the table. Its chest slowly rose and fell, breathing. I didn't want to look, but I pulled the sheet back anyway. And there it was. Me. Eyes closed. Jaw clenched. A perfect reflection. But this version looked peaceful. Like it had already accepted what was coming. Then the lights flickered. I turned. Grady stood behind me. Not a ghost. Not fully human either. His face was a patchwork of memories and rot. Jaw sewn on, skin loose, eyes like burned out bulbs. But it was his voice that froze me. You left me halfway. Now it's your turn. He raised his scalpel and offered it to me. Finish the cut. I backed away. Grady, please. I didn't know. That's the point. His voice cracked like bone. You never checked. You just assumed. You walked out of that room, and I never did. So now, finish the job. I looked back down at the body, at myself. The chest was marked. A faint line, like a guide. The the same Y incision I had made hundreds of times. My hands trembled. If I did this, what would happen? Would I die? Would I wake up in his place? Would he take over me? Was that the price? One final cut, and maybe it all ends. Or begins. I turned to Grady. Why me? Why now? He stepped forward. Because you're the last one who touched me. And I never stopped feeling it. Now, it's your turn to be opened. I looked down at the scalpel in my hand. Then, I made the first incision. SFX, metal scraping. Distant whispering. A wet, slicing sound. They found me the next morning. Collapsed on the floor of the guest house. Unconscious. No signs of forced entry. The medical report said I was dehydrated, disoriented, in a dissociative state. But I remember what I saw. What I did. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear the table calling. Still feel the scalpel in my palm. And sometimes, I see myself walking out of the guest house, just as I'm walking in.